music might not be as interesting if every note landed on a strong beat. Fortunately, we have our good friend Syncopation to give more color and character to our rhythms. Welcome to Music Student 101. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Okay, here we are in the studio.
Here we are back.
The studio fridge is off. The fans are off. The air conditioning is off. Our phones are on silent, right?
My phone. We're going to go ahead and say yes.
Do not disturb, whatever.
Great way to make everybody check their phones all at once.
Yes.
Make sure your phone's on silent.
So what is that? Oh, the drum set's covered up. The snare is disengaged. What does that all mean?
It means we're going to podcast.
We are going to podcast. Our second one of the year, 2020.
Yep.
And here's the funny thing, Matt.
Okay. Funny thing.
Episode 3, you, flying solo, did an episode on rhythm. And rhythm has always just kind of been implied. We talked a little bit about the note values, quarter notes, half notes, all that stuff, dotted things, triplets.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a sin of omission in a lot of theory texts. They don't spend a lot of time talking about rhythm.
That was my next point, actually, because I went to our tried and true Syncopation tonal harmony book.
Right, said nothing.
I looked in the index, the word syncopation just was not
Went
there.
to our also frequently referenced Francoli text, also nothing.
Nothing.
The Alan Fort book, I didn't look at it, but I'm guessing probably nothing.
Well, it wasn't until I found my 20th Century Techniques book that I actually found the word syncopation in the index.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say a whole lot about it that we can't probably just rap about.
Yeah,
in this
and that's
episode.
because, quote unquote, classical music, syncopation really was not a thing until the 20th century.
Right, yeah.
I mean, you found it occasionally. Beethoven did it in some of his string quartets and things, but theory has a tendency to ignore rhythm, which is strange. But there you have it.
It seems to focus more on really harmonic progression and voice leading and counterpoint and stuff like that.
Yeah, and sort of you can sometimes get the attitude, well, rhythm is just simple or just intuitive or just not in the purview of music theory, and I don't entirely agree.
Well, today we are going to talk about syncopation, as I said, and I think it's going to be a fun little discussion.
Yeah,
and we'll tell you a little bit more about how we're going to get into it, because this is not like it's going to be a little bit more experience-based and story-based episode.
Yeah, well, syncopation is a feel as much as anything, which is what I think we're going to find out.
Yeah. But before we get into that, I think it's time to have a new review.
New review, yay.
Now, this is kind of cool because, remember that last episode we had, and we had that bad review?
I really don't.
No, me neither. Actually, we kind of played it off legit, and I think I sounded just hurt enough with a little comical edge, and a lot of people actually sent some reviews.
Yeah, good.
Good reviews.
Good.
In lieu of this, and knocked it right off the front page.
Yay. Well, there you go.
Genius. Okay, so anyways, this new review came from our friend, a new friend, Dairy Barefoot, Daire, Dare Barefoot. They say they gave us 5 stars. They said informative.
Yay.
Great podcast. I appreciate that y'all touch more in depth on somewhat obscure topics such as harmony, scales, etc. Just one listen and intervals finally click.
That's great. Good to hear.
I am actually barefoot myself here in the studio today. As I sit cross-legged on my chair. We like to maintain an air of comfort and chillness in our...
Well, we are in your own basement.
Here at Music Student 101. So thanks again for that review.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
We're patting ourselves on the back a little bit. Mainly the reason we're reading this is because the more reviews we get, the more it boosts our presence.
The more other people get to share in our Music Student 101 community.
Yes, they do, and maybe learn a few things along the way.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Now we have ourselves a new Patreon patron.
New Patreon. This is Andy Fuller from Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah.
And Andy says, I am 42 years old and have started learning the bass again.
All right.
Yeah, I feel you, Andy. I feel you. I'm always learning the basses. I have been on again, off again for about 20 years. Over the last 12 months, I have been very diligent and have been practicing most days. Well, you're doing better than me. Mm-hmm. I have been lucky to have had lessons from 2 excellent and generous teachers. Part of my renewed interest has come about through seeing my young daughters learn the keyboard, as well as seeing 2 of my favorite bassists play live.
Isn't that beautiful?
Indeed, yeah. Doug Wimbish, which you saw in 2018, and Michelle Nogicello, who he saw in 2019. I found your podcast through doing a search on Spotify. I think I just searched for a music theory podcast. I loved your accent. I bet. And style and sense of humor, and of course that you are both bassists.
How did he know that?
Did we ever mention
I don't
that
know.
we were bass players at all?
Seems like in a dream at some
Is
point.
that something that come up
Maybe.
at some point? Maybe, I don't know.
You do so many of these episodes, you lose track.
You lose track, yeah, right. Moreover, you teach music theory without needless obfuscation or jargon.
Oh, he must have heard the episode where I talked about how much I love big words. Because that's a great one.
Obfuscation. Yeah. Obfuscation and jargon is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine in the world of music theory education.
It's kind of like lawyer speak. Or,
It can be designed to codify knowledge so that people who are not in the club aren't privy to that knowledge.
to intimidate.
Right.
To make it exclusivity.
Right.
With
yeah.
knowledge, you can't do that.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit not about those things. So I try to be as short on the jargon or obfuscation as I possibly can. Sometimes you just need a name for something, right?
Absolutely.
Like dominant function. But otherwise, yeah.
Appoggiatura.
I am coming at music from a totally amateur perspective, but am trying to be as dedicated and consistent as possible. You guys are a vital and enjoyable part of my music education. This other piece of mine on playing and teaching music as a gift may also be of interest. It briefly discusses some of the tensions around what one pays for in regards to online music courses. Best wishes. What is one paying for in an online music course? I confess I've probably never spent money on an online music course. There's a lot of stuff for free, but,
I mean, the prices vary all over the place. But
being
actually,
that I've paid a considerable amount of money for my music education, I think I'm kind of... So...
Well, Andy actually is a writer, and he wrote a great article on that, and I'm going to link that to the bottom of our page.
Excellent.
So you can just check it out. He's talking about a street busker he ran into, and it got him kind of thinking about, he saw the tips that this person was making, and he kind of got to thinking about what online education or,
Yeah, what it can do for you.
And he mentioned a lot of places, some of his best sites were people who they give the information away, but you can give donations. You can actually give donations. So that's a pretty cool thing. I told...
Kind of like us.
Yeah. And in that article, Andy mentions Flea, a bass line of Flea's, which was Soul to Squeeze. Which is one of my favorite Flea bass lines. And I recommended this little video I found on YouTube that I watched a long time ago where Flea actually gives this tutorial video. Well, it's River Phoenix interviewing Flea and just asking great random questions, nothing heavy about it. At one point, I quote Flea on this. He says, "It'd be very funny of us to talk about music theory considering neither of us know a damn thing about it." And I just thought that was kind of cool. But they go into the music and his methods, and it's just a great interview, real positive and beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Speaking of donations and such, in lieu of thanks again, Andy.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you for your Patreon patronage.
Indeed.
So in lieu of our regular listener mail today, at this point, I think I would like to go ahead and give a shout out to a number of people who have donated to us on PayPal, because we talk a lot about Patreon, but some people just want to give a one-time donation.
Sure.
And not be a part of the whole subscription thing.
Right.
And I can dig that.
Yeah.
And then some people just want to, and actually PayPal, you can do repeating donations, which our friend Bryce Hammer has done.
I see.
A lot. Bryce, along with Fred and Tina Reinhardt, Steve Kellum, Richard Del Guerco, Timothy Thew, Christopher, who we talked to before, Christopher Kentemick, Francis Vassallo, and Eamon Kelly. Both of them have been featured on the show before. We just want to say thank you.
Thank you very much.
Quarterly, we check our PayPal donations, and I try and email and say thanks to some of you. And I haven't received a lot back, but I will say right now, if you're listening, email us at info@musicstudent101.com and tell us about yourselves.
Sure.
Just say, hey, I'm one of your PayPal donors, and you asked me to tell you about myself. So here I am. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But we just want you to know that you have not been forgotten, and we do appreciate you.
Absolutely. We appreciate all our generous PayPal donations. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. We appreciate all our Patreon patrons. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. And don't forget that if you subscribe via Patreon, you can get all sorts of extra cool stuff.
Yeah, check it out.
Videos of Jeremy rocking out. Episodes in which other patrons email us questions specifically that we spend a little time answering.
And some of the Patreon questions have been so good that they actually kind of
have even bloomed into actual podcasts.
Podcasts, yeah. They qualify for a true Music Student 101 worldwide podcast.
Yeah, we say 15 minutes to answer your question. It's been an hour that we've spent on some of these.
Although we are trying to streamline now in order to get more episodes out. We really do want to try and get more Patreon episodes out, so we're going to streamline that a bit. But anyways, I think having said all that, now is just as good a time as any to get into this episode.
Talk about syncopation.
Okay. First of all, let me just read to you the definition according to Merriam-Webster.
Okay.
Merriam-Webster. A temporary displacement of the regular metrical accent in music caused typically by stressing the weak beat. Stressing.
Okay.
Oh, did you hear that, Matt? How would you? Let's get the Music Student 101 definition.
Syncopation are things that happen on the offbeat or between beats.
Okay.
So a beat is established, and then rather than things happening on that beat, things happen between that beat and the next. Mm-hmm. You know, or like we said, I can say on the weak beat, which also technically qualifies as syncopation. Mm-hmm. A lot of what people recognize as syncopation is actually sort of syncopation at the eighth note level, which means like if you're in 4/4 time between the beats.
Yes.
You know, so the rhythm of your melody or your chords or whatever gets off the rhythm of the actual meter signature. Mm-hmm. You know.
Shall we, first of all, give it like an example of what the strong versus weak beat is? I mean,
sure.
We can count and just clap if you want to.
Yeah.
But if we're in 4/4, for example,
right,
each clap is going to be a quarter note. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So
if you want to do that, I can play a chord just on the strong beats.
Okay.
So
I'll count while you play.
Yeah.
Okay. So here we are. This is not syncopated. This is
not
all
syncopated.
Very metrically sound and direct on the downbeat and everything.
Right. Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
I'll give you a measure of pre-roll.
Okay.
Pre-roll.
Pre-roll.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. There you go. On the 1 and 3.
On the 1 and 3 is where you hit those things.
Yeah, you know they clap on the 1 and 3 over there.
Mm-hmm. So in the case of 4/4, the weak beats would be considered beats 2 and 4.
Right.
Right. So
right.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So the first time.
Very simple syncopation.
1.
Very, very, very simple.
Uh-huh.
And this is syncopation at the quarter note level.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what most people think of as syncopation, at least what I think of mostly as syncopation, is at the eighth note level. Mm-hmm. So your things are coming in on the ands.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you want me to try and count that out?
Sure.
And do you want me to count and as well? So you'll know where.
Yeah. Sure.
So you'll know where that weak eighth note is.
Yeah. Sure.
And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Nice. 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. Yeah.
So, right, syncopate, off.
Hey, since we're on this nursery rhyme kick, shall we do Mary Had a Little Lamb for them?
Very much not syncopated, right?
Back to back. If we have Mary Had a Little Lamb all on the quarter notes, right?
Well, they're eighth notes.
Okay, they'll be eighth notes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mary Had a Little Lamb, this will be kind of on eighth notes mainly.
Yeah.
Non-syncopated.
Right.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4.
Very unsyncopated, straight eighth notes.
Straight eighth notes. Okay, so now we're going to do a syncopated, more jazzy version of Mary Had a Little
We'll try. Gonna try.
You ready, Maestro?
Yeah.
All right. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4.
Kind of screwed up the melody at the end there, but you get the idea.
You get the
right?
idea.
Yeah.
We're talking about rhythms mainly here anyways.
Yeah.
You've accomplished far more melodies than Mary Had a Little Lamb, Matt. It was just a simple mistake, which I'll probably fix in post anyway. They won't even know what we're talking about. So yeah, that is kind of an idea of what we're talking about when we say syncopation.
Right.
You know, it's really just kind of what does it do for music, do you think? I think to some degree it adds a little bit more conversational, like a more conversational feel.
It can. It can be... It can sort of bring rhythm into the conversation, right? Whereas up until now, were just chord progressions. You know, you're really just counting out beats until the next chord. But when you start to think about syncopation, it brings rhythm into the conversation, and so you create melodies that can more closely approximate normal speech.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You know, you can create melodies that have much greater rhythmic interest, and rhythmic interest is a very integral part of melodic interest, right? And melodic interest is a very integral part of harmonic interest. So what you're adding here is a type of creativity, you know, and a type of variation that makes your music a little less square.
Might I run a little analogy? We'll see if it works or not.
Okay.
You know how chromaticism adds tonal color?
Right. Yeah.
I'd like to say syncopation adds rhythmic color.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Because sometimes notes will come earlier than you expect them, and that kind of anticipates the next beat.
yeah.
And then sometimes they'll hold on longer and then drop out.
Yeah, it can really highlight the rhythm too. Really make the rhythm present. You know, even when there's nothing but a melody. Yeah.
Even though no one was clapping or snapping or counting, that still
you
felt...
hear the melody because of the syncopation, which is strange. You would think straight notes.
Do you think that most of us have a bit of an internal clock, which kind of, once a couple of notes are already played, you do a little bit of math in your subconscious brain and start to establish a rhythm or pulse?
Do a little, yeah. And those defiance of what's easy kind of attune your brain to it, right? And attract your attention to it. And yeah, you do sort of subconscious calculation.
Right.
Kind of makes you want to dance more, right?
Yes, it
Kind of
does.
makes you want to move more.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it does add interest. And like I said, we went through those textbooks, or I went through those textbooks, and obviously you have at some point. You never actually taught a full class on syncopation or a full lesson on syncopation.
Yeah, it's not something that's often treated as a subject in and of itself. You know, I mean, I guess sometimes it is. You know, if you're studying jazz theory, it might be.
Yes. But that's not till you get into the more advanced theory, right? 20th century music.
It depends on your background, but yeah.
Yeah, right. Our teachers didn't really get us into jazz much until after the advanced, when we were getting into 20th century music.
Yeah, college music theory is very much grown out of the Western tradition, the quote unquote classical music tradition.
Right. And all that to say is we don't really have a lesson plan, but I have a cool idea. We are going to have story time. It's been a while since we've had story time.
Oh, man. Wow.
At Music Student 101. And
we have story time every podcast.
I know.
Just read our reviews.
It's information between story time. But I think that
we tell stories and occasionally digress into some music theory.
Yes, which is what's you're about to experience that actually, because the first time that I think what we're going to do here, Matt, is I have a couple of incidents, a couple of anecdotes I'd like to share about the first time that Syncopation has reared its scary face in my world. And then hopefully you have a couple of examples of your own.
Oh, probably.
And it's no surprise that my examples are jazz standards.
Right. Yeah.
Okay? And so a little backstory here. As I mentioned before, both Matt and I took bass lessons at the University of Alabama at Birmingham with our good instructor, Cleveland Eaton.
Cleveland Eaton, former bassist for the Count Basie Orchestra.
Yes, very expressive guy, very cool guy. And what he did was, in order for us to be his students, we had to acquire, first off, the jazz real book.
Right.
Which I think at some point, maybe not at this point, but at some point was kind of like hush hush. You didn't find it anywhere.
There is some legend of it being illegal at some point, right? And the version I heard had to do with like copyright issues or something, because they had just sort of through their oral training dictated out all of these jazz tunes, and it started out being called the fake book. Fake your way through all these jazz tunes.
Right, because it would feature the melody,
right,
and then the suggested chords,
right.
And of course, the one that we had to get was in the bass clef,
right,
because we were bass players. Even though we were learning these melodies, we were learning as bassists.
Yep.
So that's one thing I had to do. And then Cleve, on my first day, he took this book and he just kind of went through it. Now, this, to tell you a little bit more about the real book, it's just under 500 jazz standards.
Yeah.
This is a lot. This is
a lot of stuff.
Yeah, if you can really read a good lead sheet, or you're in good shape with this thing.
Sure.
It retails for about $30 today, but I think back in the day, I swear it was way more than that, like $50, $60 or something.
Might have been.
But it's pretty. That's not insanely expensive. That's kind of accessible. So anyways, he took this book and went through it and took a little pencil and circled all the ones that he thought were the ones that the star players, the ones that most people should start to know. Right. That most jazz groups or ensembles probably,
which was most of them.
Which was really most of them, honestly. I don't know why he left out the few that he did.
But maybe there were ones he didn't know. So.
Hey, how can you... Yeah, I mean, there's tons of standards, man. So I wouldn't be expected to know all of them. But the ones he knew, he went ahead and... circled, or the ones he found important.
Right.
And so I just started to go through them, and one of the first ones I came across, if not the first one that I came across, was called All of Me.
Right. And we know this song, right? Yeah.
Yeah, let's see here. Oh, do you have the, on your book over there, do you have the, composers? It's Simon?
Yep, Simone and Marks.
Simone and Marks, yeah, okay. So, here's what killed me about this one. I have my music. Oh, and by the way, I meant to mention this earlier. We have a listener named Francis Vassallo. Who wrote in recently and said, man, I was listening to that episode on, I think it was the augmented six chords or something like that.
Wow.
And he was like, God, I wish I had some kind of aid, some kind of visual aid.
It can be important for that, yeah.
And he said, but then I just went to your website, and there it was.
It was.
You guys don't really say that a whole lot.
We don't, do we?
No, we don't. But just know that every episode we do.
There are visual aids on the website.
And I do painstakingly sit there and MuseScore and notate a lot of this stuff and make it pretty on Photoshop and add colors. For my examples and all that stuff.
Yep.
So having said that, you're going to see some of these melodies. Go to musicstudent101.com, click on episodes, go to episode 86.
Yes.
And you will see these aids.
Right.
So back to All of Me.
Yes.
Measure one, that's not such a big deal. We have a quarter note, but then we do have...
We do have a little syncopation in measure
We have a
one.
syncopation right off the bat, okay?
Yeah.
But this didn't kill me, okay?
Yeah, this was kind of easy.
But it is a quarter note. It starts off. Do you want to count it while you do it?
Sure.
So
This is just measure 1.
you just measure 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. See? 1. Okay, so
Yeah. So you heard that last note was between the beats, right? That last note was on an and. 1, 2, and 3, 4.
and this is visually kind of represented by the third note that you hear. Da, 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 this note right here is actually tied to the half note that follows it,
Right.
which is then tied to the half note in the following measure.
1. Yeah. So 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2. And this is the fun part.
This is the fun part. So measure 2, on beats 3 and 4, I saw this thing and I said, this must have been a misprint. Because what I see in this measure 2 of all of me,
It's a quarter note triplet.
quarter note, but it's preceded by a half note in the same measure. There's a sure enough half note. So we have that half note occupying beats 1 and 2.
Yep.
But then somehow I'm supposed to fit 3 quarter notes into the space
Of a half note.
of a half note.
Which would normally have 2 quarter notes.
And so I
Hence
said,
the quarter note triplet.
so I said, I asked Cleve about this, and he
He had a very Cleve response, I bet.
he would scat a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
He'd say, okay, fool, just let me clap. And he started clapping, he said, or stomping and clapping.
Yeah.
He was like, da da da, da dweep da da dwee da da.
That sounds like him.
And for some reason, the dweep da helped out a little bit, but I still didn't get it. And I was like, maybe one more time. And then he clapped louder and stomped louder and yelled it louder. Same thing. He just yelled it
Same
louder.
thing, just louder. Yeah, I went through the same thing with the same song.
And then I think I went to my theory teacher, Dr. Ronald Clemens, and I said, Dr. Clemens, can you please
Just, yeah.
do this? Show me how to do this.
And he's like, ba, 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 ba,
So
ba, ba, ba,
I started to realize that in
yeah.
order to do this, you have to shave off just a little bit of each of these quarter notes to where they're not exactly full-length quarter notes. Just a little bit.
Yeah.
But it does have, you will see, this little bracket beneath the notes. And I think it's normally on top of the notes, but for some reason this thing printed it out beneath. But you'll see this little bracket and a little 3 in the middle. So that, and you see 3 quarter notes within that bracket. That
Right,
means
yeah.
you are staring deep into the eyes of the quarter note triplet. You know?
Yeah, yeah. The quarter note triplet is the same theoretical principle as an eighth note triplet, where there would be 2 eighth notes. We have 3, and then we have an eighth note triplet. Ba da 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 da. Right. Yeah. It's just up a level.
Yeah.
And so can be confusing.
But what
I
makes...
always tried to make it a quarter and 2 eighths, and Cleve would
Yeah, right.
would really blow his stack. I always would try to go, you know.
Yeah.
So 1 or 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3.
Because if you're just getting to know this and you're sitting there just clapping or snapping and you're seeing these notes, it's just like counterintuitive to...
Well, yeah, and I'd grown up, playing Baptist hymns and stuff. I didn't know how to syncopate anything.
Yeah, well,
I didn't know what a quarter note triplet was.
the quarter note triplet has a specific feel. And now that I took all that time and all the suffering and pain to actually execute it properly, I found that I recognize it when I hear it now. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah. So, 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't do it. I can't count and play at the same time.
You want me to play it on the bass?
Yeah, play it on the bass.
Let's see here. So we're just going to play this real quick so you can kind of hear it in effect. While Matt counts, I'm going to try and do this quarter note triplet thing.
Okay,
And you'll
yeah.
hear it like on every the second measure.
Yeah. Ready?
Uh-huh.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2,
So on.
3, 4. And so on, yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of get that. It's like
Yeah.
I mean, I've held out too long, but.
Yeah. Fun stuff.
So that was all of me. That was my first, that was my quarter note triplet. That was the first syncopation kind of thing that I came across that just really blew my mind. It was my biggest challenge. And this book is in alphabetical order, okay?
Yeah.
So this is all of me.
A.
So the first thing I see is like this, and I'm like, oh my God, did this scare me away from jazz? Possibly. This might have scared me, because then my next one, I'll go ahead and get into this next one here. Has anyone heard of this jazz cat from Kansas City named Charlie Parker, also known as the Bird?
Seems like we may have at some point.
Charlie Parker, from all the stuff that I learned of his, was some of the most challenging, and I did find most of that syncopation in a lot of his stuff. And moving on in the alphabet to Auprivav.
Yeah.
Or Auprivav. A-U.
Auprivav.
P-R-I-V-A-V-E.
Yeah.
Matt is finding it in the jazz book.
And here we go.
What key is this in? F?
F.
Key of
Yeah.
F, yeah. Now, unfortunately, it's been a while, and I didn't even do it that great at the time. So what I have here is... Yeah, that's the one. You've heard it before. I don't know, Matt. I don't know how you feel about playing this, but either way, I have this on my MIDI, so I can actually play it with a click track so people can hear it.
I'm not sight reading this melody.
Okay, I'm not sight reading this melody either.
I'll play the chords if you want.
So what I have here is a MIDI file of this piece of music. So you can actually, you will see it where it's on the website.
Yeah.
But I just want to play it so you can hear the click track and the notes and how they are not landing in the same place a lot. Just to give you an idea. So the meter is about 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Man, so you heard all the times that the notes happen with outside of my count.
Right, yeah.
But maybe we can just look at a couple of these examples under a microscope.
Sure,
if you
yeah.
want
Well,
to.
the first measure, it starts off, okay, these are pretty straightforward. 1 and 2 and 3
and 4 and...
Yeah, but then, 1. And then it comes in, the next little eighth note thing comes in on beat 4.
Uh-huh.
And then goes over into the next measure.
Right. It doesn't tie necessarily.
So let me do that again. 1 and 2 and 3
and
4 and 1
and 2 and 3.
4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and
The first measure kind of passes my test for simplicity.
The first half of it anyway.
Yeah. Well, I guess by that melody coming in on the 4th beat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weak beat.
It's a weak beat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay, so we're good. So we got, and then measure 2, we have 2 eighth notes, this A moving down to C. And then we have, like we talked about, this 8th note rest. I don't know if we talked about this, but we will.
Yeah,
As
that
an
8th note
indicator
rest is on the downbeat.
Is on the downbeat.
Yeah, and this is kind of, a lot of times with syncopation, you kind of have figures that kick you into syncopation and then figures that kick you out.
Yeah.
And like an 8th note rest followed by an 8th note that then is usually tied into another 8th note.
On a stronger beat, perhaps?
Yeah, right.
The note it's tied to is on a stronger beat.
Right, exactly. And so this is one of those figures that you're kicked into a syncopation by this. Or if you have an 8th note rest followed by a quarter note, right, then that is kicking you past the beat. So this is one of these figures that sort of kick you into syncopation when you 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and and you hear that G come up on that and, right? 2 and 3 and 4 and, right?
Yeah, and speaking of getting in and out, another thing that makes this weird is because this syncopation on measure 2, like we're talking about, this E note, that ties to the next E note. It begins an eighth note run that lasts the entirety of the third measure.
Right.
But because it came in on what felt to me like an upbeat of another note, or because it happened, I wanted to call it a downbeat.
Yeah.
But it runs into this sequence at a strange place. So you're beginning an eighth note run, which is not completely all eighth, all on the count, right?
Yeah.
It's on the count, but it starts earlier in the previous measure.
Yeah,
so.
when the downbeat of the next measure comes in, it's going to feel a little more straight again.
If you.
Yeah. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and
Yeah.
So at that point it's going to sound but then the next measure.
Okay.
And this is classic.
Can you play this while I count? Just this one measure?
Yeah, count it.
We can loop it. Okay. You ready?
Wait. 1 and 2 and... Okay, yeah.
And I want to point out what's happening here, guys, is on the downbeat of this measure 4 is a rest. Eighth note rest.
Eighth
so
note
you're going to
rest.
come in on the and after this downbeat.
Followed by a dotted quarter.
On the weak beat.
Yeah, followed by an eighth note rest.
On the strong beat.
Followed by a quarter. And then that's going to leave us an eighth note left to fill out the measure.
On a weak beat.
On a beat. Well, not even on a beat, between a beat.
Ooh. Okay. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. The end of the weak beat even.
Yep,
So that's
yep,
like a
the end of the weak beat.
weaker beat. Okay, you want to try this?
Yeah.
This is just this one measure 4.
Yeah.
I'll give you 2 measures.
Yep.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2.
Yeah. And then it goes on. Yeah.
Moved on to that next.
Fun
and
stuff.
Measure 5 lands on a downbeat.
Yeah.
So he's not making the whole thing a bunch of syncopations. But
No, Charlie Parker is he's moving in and out of syncopation to keep, and in so doing has made this a very fun melody to listen to. But very, very challenging to play.
yeah, right.
As you learned.
It does. Yeah, it does sound like something. When you hear all the cats playing it together, it sounds real cool and natural. But when you're sitting there trying to analyze it and learn it, different story. One thing that was cool about this experience for me was, in order to get these tunes to a place where I can share them on the website, I couldn't just copy and paste the real book. I couldn't just get a photocopy of that. I had to actually make my own MIDI or notation version of this.
Right.
Now, to do that, I wanted to use the treble clef because I think more readers are probably more familiar with the treble clef.
Sure.
So what I had to do was transpose it from the bass clef up a third to make the difference between bass and treble clef.
Sure.
So that was a good exercise for me, and not to mention just having to learn these tunes again.
Yeah.
And get back in touch with syncopation.
It has been a while.
It was actually a very good experience for me, and I would certainly recommend you guys to try this, actually. If you have a challenging piece, you already have the notation, and you have notation software, take the notation and actually transcribe it yourself to your own software.
Right, yeah.
That's a good way to get intimate with a piece of music, you know what I mean? Let's talk about your some of your challenges, Matt.
Well, I remember So What.
So What?
Yeah, Miles Davis.
And
I remember really loving this bass line. Yeah, there you go. Which itself is syncopated, right? It begins on an eighth note rest. Mm-hmm. And the book we used, the real book, just had these as straight eighth notes after that one. Mm-hmm. But literally nobody played it that way, right? Mm-hmm. Because we were supposed to swing it.
Yeah, swing it.
This was jazz.
Yeah.
And then it had these chords on top that were just a G major and a D minor chord.
Okay.
Yeah. And the G major chord comes in on beat 3, lasts for a dotted quarter note, and then this D minor, which is actually its resolution, the chord on the lead sheet here is D minor 7. So this is actually the chord we're going for. Mm-hmm. It's just that eighth note, just that last eighth note of the measure. 3, 4, and.
Yeah, that's it.
So. Yeah. So I really love that. I thought that was just the coolest thing ever.
Do you want me to count it while you play it so they can get an idea of where everything falls in?
Sure.
So now that we kind of talked a little bit about So What and the weirdnesses in it, let's try and count it and play it.
Let's see how this goes.
Now we're going to max ourselves out here because you're going to be playing the melody and the chords a little bit, and I'm going to be counting while walking a bass line.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't be a problem for me because I'm going to be walking in meter. My walking will not be syncopated.
Yeah, walking bass in jazz is usually straight. That's what's establishing the rhythm, so everything else can play is syncopated melodies over it.
Okay, you ready? Mm-hmm. Okay, so here we go. Yeah. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2.
That was pretty fun.
That worked out.
And it goes to E flat at some point.
Yeah, the A section is actually D Dorian, which is another cool thing about this piece. It's in D Dorian.
Yeah. Good point. It absolutely
is. And the B
is.
section, it's the same thing, only it just steps up a half step to E flat.
Yeah.
For half that duration and then goes back.
All right. Yeah.
So that's a cool one, huh?
That was a good one. Yeah.
And that's one of those ones that was more popular, one of the more popular jazz standards. So we learned it right off. You know.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And now there's another one that a lot of people are familiar with that you mentioned as well as to be one of your earlier challenges, right?
Yeah, the Dave Brubeck.
Yeah,
Take 5.
Take 5, made famous by Dave Brubeck, composed by Paul Desmond.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to be playing the melody. We're just going to talk about this bass line because this bass line is one of the more iconic parts of the song.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's in 5/8, right? So this has syncopation actually built into the meter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that the second half of the meter is shorter than the first half, right? Mm-hmm. So for that reason, there's actually a certain amount of swing built into these meters. This is what we call an asymmetrical meter. Mm-hmm. But then the actual bass line has some syncopation in it too, if I remember correctly.
Right. Where previously I was just walking that bass line.
Yeah.
And it was pretty straight on the downbeat.
Yeah.
But now this bass line
can't do that.
It's not doing a very bass line-y thing, but it sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Shall I play it for you?
Yes, do that.
Can you count me down?
Tempo 1, 2, 3, 4, 1.
Oh, don't forget we're in 5.
And
it's more like a
1,
2, 3, 4.
4, 5. 1. Yeah, okay, there you go. Yeah.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So E flat.
Yep.
5.
Yep.
This reeks of complication to me as a bassist. But really, it didn't take me long to pick that up because the feel is just
but and when you notice it saying in kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, that is a 16th note, right?
Yeah.
Happening between the 8th notes that are the beat in 5/8.
So it's the do ba
3,
4 5 Yeah.
Yeah.
4 5 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3. So yeah, man. Paul Desmond, Dave Brubeck, y'all. That's cool music.
That is
cool music.
That is. Go definitely check out Take 5. Mm-hmm. That's a great song.
And you will see where I'll go ahead and put those melodies up on the website as well.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing I want to do before we get out of here is talk about a couple of indicators that we ran into that might suggest to you that you are dealing with syncopations.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
The first one I have here, as you mentioned, was the eighth note rest on a downbeat.
Right. Eighth note rest on a beat.
On a beat.
Yeah.
Rather than on the end of a beat.
Right. Yeah, an eighth note rest on the beat, followed by either an eighth rest tied or a quarter note that you would think would be on the beat. But, this has sort of kicked you off the beat. Now you're sort of syncopated.
Right.
Right.
So some of those things we ran into in Opravav and also...
And also in So What.
So What, yeah.
I think, and in all of these, that's what makes syncopation.
Another thing you might see is, like we said, a tie from one note to the next. That kind of suggests you hold the note up into and including the position where the other note would take place.
Right, yeah.
Another thing that we don't really talk about a whole lot in reading music and playing music with notation is when you're supposed to release a note.
Yeah.
Which is something I never pay attention to, but it's a thing, right?
I'm kind of bad about it myself.
Yeah. So you're actually supposed to take into account when you're playing a note, you count if it's a measure of 4 and you see a dotted half note, that means you play it for 1, 2, 3 release.
Right, yeah.
Right? You release on 4, where there will likely be a quarter note rest. But anyway, another thing we run into, I think that indicates syncopation is, we said dotted notes, right? Or did we?
Yeah, well, dotted notes, if we didn't, we should have. Dotted notes definitely can, especially, again, if they're not occurring on the beat. If you see an eighth rest or an eighth note followed by a dotted quarter, then you have sort of been kicked off into syncopation, right? Because that dot means it's going to go past the next beat and be sort of, and the next thing that happens is going to happen on the and.
Right.
Yeah.
Good indicator of syncopation. And finally, we have our the quarter note triplet, which we talked about.
Oh, gosh, yes, the quarter note triplet.
Does that also apply for eighth note triplets or any other kind of triplets? Or you can have triplets without syncopation. I mean,
you can have triplets without syncopation. An eighth note triplet, if you're in 4/4 time, is going to occupy just the space of a beat. But it is a little bit kind of maybe an example, just because you have had to divide those eighth notes differently, and you're going to have to get 3 of them into where there would usually be 2. So it could sort of count.
Right on. And so, is there any point in recapping this? I mean, we defined.
I think we just did.
Yeah, we just kind of basically, it's a very simple concept.
It's a simple concept. It's all about practice and feel.
And sharing our horror stories with you guys.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I guess that's it for that, huh?
Well, happy syncopating.
Happy syncopating. Go out and syncopate away.
And we will see you guys soon.
So, we learned some cool new tricks today. Let's see what you do with them. Feel free to share your music with us at info@musicstudent101.com. And if you wish to support us financially, you can do so at patreon.com/musicstudent101.